This video is for the socialists. I read your comments and I'm taking the feedback to heart. I definitely want to define as a anarcho-capitalist what I mean when I describe capitalism versus socialism. I think that the socialists and capitalists probably have similar intentions when they say they want the most amount of peace and prosperity for society. But the issue becomes about the means. How do we get to a society of peace and prosperity? So I'm going to do my best in this video to explain to you the fundamentals of capitalism, socialism, markets, economics versus politics. And if anything's confusing, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you found confusing and I'll try to explain myself better. But I think the best place to begin is with Hans Oppenheimer's dissection of the two ways to acquire wealth in society. So on one hand, we have what's considered the economic means, okay? Economics. Economics is another word for social cooperation. The way I can acquire wealth is if I provide a good or a service and someone exchanges with me, okay? This is different from the classical school economists' idea of what value is, even the ancient Greeks who thought that when you make an exchange, there's an equivalence of valuation. No. If I have this pen and you have an iPhone and I want your iPhone and you want my pen, then we make an exchange. It doesn't mean they're equal in value. It means they're subjectively valuated from us as two exchanging individuals. If we don't agree on an exchange, then the exchange doesn't occur and there's no value equivalence. It's a subjective value equivalent. Subjective valuations. If maybe it takes more pens to get your iPhone, hence prices of iPhones in regards to markers. Now, then money comes along, blah, blah, blah. You have more specialization, more exchange. Indirect exchange is where money came from. So you produce goods or services and I sell them on the market. If I'm good at it and I can produce more or better quality goods, then I get more money, okay? The other way to acquire wealth in society is what's considered the political means, or let's call it politics, okay? The political means is what historically has been the idea of I go into a land and I conquer and I extract the value, I extract the wealth. And that's where you had tribes basically get approached by the invading barbarian tribes and they get taken over. Okay, think of the mafia. The mafia comes in, says, hey, you need some protection, pay a little monthly revenue, capiche? Okay, this is the idea of the political means. You're using power. This is the Italian philosophy, the Italian school of politics, of political science, where they say, no, politics is all about power. How do you use power? What do I have to say or do to get you to do what I want you to do? That's about power, okay? Obviously, if I'm better at being suave and I'm more propagandistic, then I can use that to get you to do what I want you to do rather than just at gunpoint. But either way, you're succumbing to what I want, and that's power without me necessarily having to give you anything other than like a psychological security or even just a threat alone. So this is the political means, and we have the economic means. Okay. So let's talk about capitalism. Capitalism, actually the term came from Karl Marx, where he was saying capitalism is surplus value. Capital essentially came from like the amount of cows you owned, and that was your wealth, what you actually have in your own possession. So historically, people were agrarian farmers. You lived on the land. You had big families. Infant mortality was super high, so you have a lot of children. Life expectancy wasn't long. Then the Industrial Revolution came along, and people became more productive because of the specialization and innovations of new inventions. So instead of 100 people making 10 units of output. You could have one person making 100 units of output. So productivity rose, and then wages rose, because wages are a form of your marginal productivity. Okay, so how do we figure out what are we to produce and at what prices? This is the phenomena of entrepreneurial action, who looks out into the world, says, you know what, I need a way to write something. Let me make a dry erase marker and a whiteboard. Okay, someone invented that. Someone invented the iPhone. Steve Jobs. Everything, look around this room, your room, everything was invented by people. And so this is what's called specialization. And yes, if you specialize in making something and you're good at it and you can sell it on the market, you get what's known as profits. So profits are essentially your revenue minus your costs. And if it's a surplus, it's profits. If it's negative, it's called a loss. And it's so interesting that so many socialists will be like, oh, profit exploitation. But don't forget losses, that entrepreneurial action, capitalists, incur losses as well. So both profits and losses are signals to the world, to the market economy, about what they are to produce. If this good is not making money, then it will cease production, or someone else will have to come in, innovate, make it at a better quality product at a better price. Okay, but this is where it gets interesting, because in this system of capitalism, you basically have your entrepreneur capitalists, and what do they need? They need capital, they need labor. So people work for them. So that's what a wage earner is, someone who labors. Okay, yeah, call them your proletariat. But the proletariat has an agreement with a capitalist. You're going to pay me this amount and I'm going to work this amount. Let's call it a wage over time of marginal productivity. If I'm paying you $10 million to cut my grass, who's exploiting who? It's a subjective valuation if we make the exchange. So we're both better off, because psychologically we believe we're better off. If you wanted to work on the farms and be agrarian and more primitive or autarkic, then you're free to do so. But if you want more money, then you go get a job and you go work for capitalists and entrepreneurs because they pay you. So there's no exploitation here. The capitalist gets profits, but at the possibility, the uncertainty that he can get losses too. And we don't say, oh, look at the capitalist, he's getting profits, boo. But when he incurs losses, the socialists are zipped. Do you think capitalists, if they incur losses, well, I mean, this is somehow that's exploitation. Should they also be like subsidized for the losses they incur? Well, that's what we have with politics. Okay, this is the issue I have with politics, and why I'm an anarchist and I want a free market for capitalism, because politics comes along and says, wait a minute, absolutely, we can't have capitalists incurring losses. So what does politics do? They do what's called interventions, or interventionism. Interventionism, I can't spell. Interventionism. That's not how you spell it, but don't worry. They do regulations. Okay, so politics, the political means is, we'll get to socialism, but this is what's considered the third way. That, wow, we need to put regulations on capitalism. We can't have laissez-faire, laissez-passer, let it be, let the market be, and let it figure itself out. No. We need the state authority. So the state comes along and they put regulations. The whole Great Depression and the 2008 financial crisis came about because of regulations in banking, in interest rates, in the production of money. So basically, artificially lowered interest rates allowed banks to take out and produce more loans, backed by the assurance of the central bank Federal Reserve System saying, yeah, you can loan these out, we'll bail you out. I mean, it's a whole process, technical process of buying back bonds from the banks. But essentially, this created an artificial bubble, the artificial boom, the good times of the roaring 20s. But it's basically like giving a bunch of drugs into the economy, heroin, alcohol, partying, and then the next morning the hangover comes, the recession comes. And the whole solution of the politics, the interventionists is, well, we can't face the pain of this hangover, so take more drugs, take more alcohol, let's keep the party going. And as John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. Okay, no, actually, the recession was the cleansing mechanism because prices adjust to money. They adjust to the goods available in society. And if you just produce money on one hand without changing the actual supply of goods, then the prices of these goods are going to go up without changing the goods themselves. But if you have both an increase in goods and increase in money, then you're going to see less of this price adjustment. But the adjustment will have to come. Nevertheless, the problem with interventionism is it creates distortions in the market. And these distortions then have to be corrected, as the government says, by more interventions. And this process leads step by step until we arrive at complete socialism. And what is socialism? As Marx defined, it is the public ownership of the means of production. Or in other words, what's the public? If the people here, the producers and consumers, don't own it, then the public becomes a euphemism for the state, for government. Okay? So when government owns everything, that's what I'm referring to as socialism. Think of public education. Public education, when it's free and compulsory, is essentially state education. And it's a philosophical question of what you want the government to teach your children. Okay? But this is a form of socialism. The production of money, when you have legal tender laws and Federal Reserve banknotes, and you're not allowed to exchange or use other forms of medium of exchange, then you have a form of socialized money. What about interest rates? Why don't we have the market, people, consumers, producers, debtors, and the loaners, creditors, setting the interest rate? The government sets the interest rate. The political tool is the Federal Reserve. So they're printing more money. So this is a form of socialism. Socialism, the way I like to define it, is the institutionalized centralization of the use of coercion. That's why in the 20th century you had democide, where governments were killing their own people in socialist societies. Because the whole premise is we're all in this together, and if you're against us, if you're against the party, then you should be put up against the wall. And what happened? How much production occurred under socialism? So you want a division of labor. Think of a restaurant, okay? You have a cook, a chef, and you have line cooks, and you have the waitresses, waiters serving the food. Whose value is like, say the head chef is the owner of the restaurant, are you telling me then like the waiters are the ones who like own the capital of the restaurant? The problem is when you abolish private property, the whole problem with socialism is that there's no way to efficiently allocate the scarce resources in society because you don't have prices. And when you don't have prices for goods, then you don't have the profit and loss signals, which actually are used to tell the entrepreneur capitalists what to produce for consumers. So in my idea of anarcho-capitalism, it's for consumer satisfaction, consumer sovereignty. And the more regulations you have and interventions you have, the more the sovereignty from consumers goes to politics, until you have a whole politically established society, which is known as socialism. So the few 1%, let them actually compete to be 1% instead of being insulated by the political regulations and interventions in society. And that's the problem you have with the system we have today. The system we have today is so regulated, so interventionized, that it's a mutilated form of capitalism, if you can call it capitalism. Otherwise, it's just corporatism or cronyism. And corporatism, where you have the merging of corporations and the state, is what Mussolini called fascism. And fascism is a variety of socialism. It's a variety because it says, yeah, oh, we have private corporations. These are private businesses. But when you merge with the state, this corporatism, then the state is saying, you're going to produce this, this is how much you're going to produce, this is what you're going to produce, and this is who you're able to sell it to. So fascism is National Socialism. It's not capitalism. And I'm not a right-wing conservative. You know, I want full market capitalism, because then we'll be truly prosperous and then we'll be free from the state. And the way to get there is to have a separation of the state and production of money. Because as long as the state produces the money, then they can get around direct taxation and they can inflate the money to pay for what the political establishment wants to pay for, which is war. War socialism, the Department of War. If the government had a butcher shop in your area, in your town, then the butcher would be butchering. If the government has these contracts with weapon manufacturers, bomb manufacturers, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, then they're going to produce bombs. How is this a product of capitalism? There's no market for it. There's no consumers in the society, in the public, who are saying, actually, we need more guns and bombs. No, they're saying we want food, clothing, and shelter. So this is not a product of capitalism. It's a product of statism. Statism is the whole genesis of socialism. They're one and the same thing. That's why I'm anti-state and anti-socialism. It's both a political and economic analysis. So when you have the state, as Randolph Bourne said, war is the health of the state, then you're going to have war. Why do you think we have all these nations fighting? I have friends in Iran, Ukraine, Russia, Middle East, Saudi Arabia, everywhere, all over the world, China, Japan, Monaco. I don't want anything to happen to them, let alone the country, but it's the governments who make money, blood money, off killing people, women, children included, citizens. And that's the problem with democracy is, wow, the whole nation needs to be taken down, rather than under monarchies where just the king needed to be taken down. And the people understand, yeah, it's a power authority. This one wants to rule, that one wants to rule. Let them fight rather than dragging all the citizens into it. George Bush, million Iraqis dead. Now he's a painter in Texas. So under monarchies, it was the kings that were killed and held responsible and liable for the debts they incur and the wars, the cost of wars that they committed. Under democracy, 1 in 4 veterans commit suicide. The soldiers kill themselves. And the leaders, the presidents, become painters. They go scot-free. And they kick the can of debt down the road onto the next generations. So the Generation Z in the United States is incurring, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars in debt. I don't even want to look at it. It's crazy. I don't even know what it's at now. Tomorrow will be something bigger. Okay. So then you ask, why is housing so expensive? Because of war, because of politics, because of statism, socialism, the money going into creating that. So foreign policy is connected to economics and it's connected to culture. And you ask, wow, so many socialists in the world, they must be right. No, they're wrong because they're ignorant about economics. And what I'm just not even trying to argue, I'm just trying to explain to you my analysis of what's going on in the world and the difference between economics and markets and capitalism versus politics and socialism. That's all. So if any of this you need more clarification on, leave a comment. I'll gladly respond. But I'm going to talk, and I'm going to talk both to capitalists and socialists to try to explain this. Because this is so fucking stupid that we have wars and expenses that are driving the world into third world impoverishment. And then you have people are saying it's the problem of capitalism. It's like, no. Look a little deeper. It's a problem of politics. It's a problem of democracy. And that's why I'm against all that, because I see what it's doing to the world. So, stay free. Peace.